In a quiet little town surrounded by green hills and thick woods, life moved at a slow, predictable pace. People knew each other by name, and the biggest excitement usually came from the annual summer fair or an unexpected snowstorm in winter. But one evening, something happened that would shake the entire community to its core. It all started when a young woman finished her shift at the local cafe where she worked. She was walking home alone, her footsteps echoing softly on the pavement. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the streets were mostly empty, except for a group of bikers hanging out near the park. Their loud laughter and the rumble of their motorcycles broke the peaceful silence of the evening. They looked tough, with leather jackets covered in patches and tattoos peeking out from under their sleeves. The young woman tried not to pay too much attention to them. She crossed the street, hoping to avoid any interaction. But one of the bikers noticed her. He was a big man with a scruffy beard and arms decorated with intricate tattoos. Something about her caught his eye, and without hesitation, he got off his bike and began following her on foot. At first, she didn't think much of it. Maybe he just needed directions or wanted to ask something simple, but as he drew closer, her heart started racing. His presence felt menacing, and she quickened her pace, clutching her bag tightly against her chest. Her instincts screamed at her to run, but before she could, the man grabbed her arm roughly. Startled, she let out a gasp and tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. "Where are you going in such a hurry?" he growled, his voice low and threatening. Panic surged through her body as he dragged her toward a dark alley nearby. She struggled, kicking and twisting, but he was too strong. Tears welled up in her eyes as she realized no one was around to hear her cries for help. Just as despair began to take over, two figures appeared at the end of the street. One of them was a tall, muscular man with short-cropped hair and an air of quiet confidence. The other was leaner, with a calm yet determined expression. Both men looked like they had stepped straight out of a movie, because, in a way, they had. One was a well-known action star visiting the town for work, while the other was a beloved actor passing through after attending a charity event. Neither of them hesitated when they saw what was happening. The taller man stepped forward first, his voice steady and firm. "Let her go," he said, his words sharp enough to cut through the tension. The bikers sneered, refusing to release the young woman. Instead, he taunted the two newcomers, mocking them for looking like pretty boys who belong on a screen. The second man, standing slightly behind his companion, spoke next. His tone was calm but carried a warning. "You really don't want to do this," he said, locking eyes with the biker. For a moment, everything seemed frozen. The young woman held her breath, unsure if these strangers could actually save her. Then, without warning, the situation escalated. The biker shoved her further into the shadows, his threats growing louder. That's when the taller man made his move. In one fluid motion, he closed the distance between them and delivered a powerful punch that sent the biker stumbling backward. The second man sprang into action too, using his agility to slip past the attacker and pull the young woman free. She stumbled out of the alley, shaking and crying, as the two men confronted the biker head-on. It was clear now that this wasn't going to end quietly. The rest of the biker gang heard the commotion and rushed over, surrounding the pair. Outnumbered but undeterred, the two actors exchanged a glance, silently agreeing on a plan. What followed was a chaotic but impressive display of teamwork. The taller man took charge, delivering hard-hitting blows that knocked several attackers off their feet. Meanwhile, the second man moved with precision, dodging punches and countering with swift kicks. People nearby began to notice the fight. Some stopped to watch in disbelief, while others quickly called the police. The sound of sirens soon filled the air, and flashing lights illuminated the scene. Seeing the authorities arrive, most of the bikers scattered, leaving their leader and a few others behind. By then, the two heroes were bruised and breathing heavily, but they stood tall, knowing they had done the right thing. As the police took control of the situation, the young woman approached the two men, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't shown up." The taller man gave her a reassuring nod, while the second man offered a small, kind smile. Neither of them sought recognition, They simply wanted to ensure she was safe. Word of the incident spread quickly. By morning, the story had gone viral online, with people praising the bravery of the two actors. Reporters flooded the town, eager to learn more about the real-life heroes who had stepped in to protect a stranger. Despite the sudden fame, both men remained humble, insisting they had only done what anyone else would have done in their place. For the young woman, the experience changed her life forever. Inspired by the courage of her rescuers, she decided to channel her fear into something positive. She began volunteering at a local self-defense program, helping others learn how to protect themselves. Her story became a symbol of hope, reminding everyone that even in the darkest moments there are always people willing to step up and make a difference. And though the two actors returned to their busy lives, the memory of that night stayed with them. It was a reminder that heroism isn't about grand gestures or seeking glory. It's about doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. As the chaos unfolded in that dimly lit alley, the two men found themselves surrounded by a growing number of bikers. Each one looked angrier than the last, their faces twisted with hostility. The odds were stacked heavily against them. Two strangers versus a gang of tough, adrenaline-fueled individuals. But neither man flinched. They stood shoulder to shoulder, ready to face whatever came next. The taller man, whose presence commanded respect even in the most ordinary situations, cracked his knuckles. His eyes scanned the group, assessing the situation like a seasoned fighter. He wasn't there to start trouble, but he was more than prepared to finish it. The second man, quieter but equally determined, moved slightly behind him, creating a united front. Together they formed an unspoken bond, a partnership forged in the heat of the moment. One biker, clearly the ringleader, stepped forward. He spat on the ground and snarled, "You think you're tough, huh? You picked the wrong night to play hero." His voice dripped with arrogance, but there was also a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Something about these two men unsettled him. Maybe it was the calm way they carried themselves, or the fact that they hadn't backed down despite being outnumbered. Whatever it was, it made him hesitate for just a second. And that was all the opening the taller man needed. Without warning, he lunged forward, delivering a swift punch that landed squarely on the ringleader's jaw. The impact sent the biker stumbling backward, clutching his face. Before the others could react, the second man sprang into action. He sidestepped a swinging fist aimed at him and countered with a precise kick to another biker's knee, causing the man to collapse with a groan. The fight had officially begun. What followed was a blur of motion. Fists flew, feet kicked, and shouts echoed through the narrow alleyway. The taller man fought with raw power, each blow landing with precision and force. He moved like someone who had spent years honing his skills, every strike calculated and effective. Meanwhile, the second man relied on speed and agility. He darted around his opponents, dodging attacks and striking back with quick, efficient movements. Their styles complemented each other perfectly, turning what could have been a losing battle into something remarkable. People passing by stopped in their tracks, unable to believe what they were seeing. Some pulled out their phones to record the scene, while others shouted encouragement from a safe distance. A few brave souls even tried to intervene, yelling at the bikers to stop and let the young woman go. But the gang was too focused on the fight, consumed by anger and pride. They weren't about to back down. Not yet. Despite their numbers, the bikers quickly realized they were up against something extraordinary. The taller man seemed unstoppable, taking down one opponent after another with relentless determination. The second man, though smaller in stature, was proving to be just as formidable. His calm demeanor masked a fierce intensity, and his movements were so fluid that they almost looked choreographed. It was as if they had rehearsed this very scenario countless times before, but the bikers weren't giving up easily. One of them grabbed a metal pipe lying nearby and swung it wildly at the taller man. The crowd gasped, fearing the worst. But the man ducked just in time, narrowly avoiding the blow. In one smooth motion, he grabbed the attacker's arm, twisting it until the pipe clattered to the ground. Another biker lunged at the second man, attempting to tackle him to the ground. But instead of falling, the man used the momentum to flip, his attacker over his shoulder sending him crashing onto the pavement. By now, the alley was filled with the sounds of grunts, yells, and scuffling feet. The young woman, still standing near the edge of the scene, watched in stunned silence. She couldn't believe what she was witnessing. These two strangers had risked everything to save her, and they were holding their own against overwhelming odds. Her fear slowly gave way to awe, and then to gratitude. She clutched her phone tightly, dialing emergency services with trembling fingers. As the fight dragged on, the bikers began to falter. Several of them lay sprawled on the ground, nursing injuries and glaring at their opponents with a mixture of hatred and disbelief. Others had retreated to the sidelines, unwilling to step back into the fray. Only the ringleader remained standing, his bravado replaced by desperation. He charged at the taller man, throwing wild punches in a last-ditch effort to regain control. But his exhaustion showed, and his attacks were sloppy and easy to evade. The final blow came when the taller man caught the ringleader's arm mid-swing and delivered a powerful uppercut. The man crumpled to the ground, defeated. For a brief moment, everything went quiet. The only sounds were heavy breathing and the distant hum of traffic. Then, breaking the silence, the wail of sirens grew louder as police cars approached the scene. The arrival of law enforcement changed everything. Officers poured out of their vehicles, shouting orders for everyone to freeze. Some of the bikers attempted to flee, disappearing into the shadows, while others surrendered without resistance. The taller man and the second man raised their hands, signaling they posed no threat. Their faces were flushed, their clothes disheveled, but they stood tall, knowing they had done the right thing. The young woman rushed over to them, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know how I can ever repay you." The taller man shook his head, dismissing her gratitude with a small smile. "Just take care of yourself," he replied simply. The second man added, "We're just glad we were here to help." As the officers began questioning witnesses and rounding up the remaining bikers, the crowd dispersed, buzzing with excitement. People couldn't stop talking about what they had seen. The two men who had stepped in without hesitation, risking their own safety to protect a stranger. Word spread quickly, not just through the town but far beyond it. By morning, the story had reached social media, where it exploded into a viral sensation. Reporters descended on the small town, eager to interview the heroes and learn more about their incredible act of bravery. Cameras flashed, microphones were thrust into their faces, and questions came rapid fire. But both men remained humble, deflecting praise and insisting they had simply done what anyone else would have done. "It's not about being famous," the taller man told one reporter. "It's about doing the right thing when it matters most." For the young woman, the experience left an indelible mark. Inspired by the courage of her rescuers, she vowed to turn her fear into strength. She joined a local self-defense program, learning techniques to protect herself and sharing her story to inspire others. Her journey became a testament to resilience, proving that even in the darkest moments, light can shine through. And though the two men eventually returned to their respective lives, the memory of that night stayed with them. It was a reminder that true heroism isn't defined by fame or recognition. It's about standing up for what's right, even when the odds are against you. The aftermath of the fight left the small town buzzing with energy. People couldn't stop talking about what had happened in that alleyway. The image of two ordinary-looking men taking on a gang of bikers to save a stranger was almost too cinematic to believe. Yet, here it was. Real life unfolding right before their eyes. As the news spread, the story took on a life of its own, growing bigger and more inspiring with each retelling. When the police arrived, they worked quickly to separate everyone involved. Officers questioned the young woman first, her voice trembling as she recounted the terrifying ordeal. She described how the biker had grabbed her, dragged her into the alley, and threatened her. Then she spoke about the two men who had appeared out of nowhere, stepping in without hesitation. Her words painted a vivid picture of fear turning into hope, thanks to their bravery. The officers listened intently, jotting down notes as she spoke. Next, the police turned their attention to the two heroes. Both men answered calmly, explaining exactly what had happened. They didn't try to dramatize anything or make themselves sound like larger-than-life figures. Instead, they stuck to the facts, describing how they had intervened when they saw someone in danger. When asked why they had stepped in, the taller man shrugged. "It wasn't a choice," he said simply. "You see something wrong, you fix it." The second man nodded in agreement, adding, "Anyone would have done the same." But not everyone agreed with that sentiment. To the people watching from the sidelines, these two men were extraordinary. Their actions weren't just brave, they were selfless. In a world where so many turn a blind eye to trouble, they had chosen to act. And they hadn't just acted. They had fought back, putting themselves directly in harm's way to protect someone they didn't even know. That kind of courage wasn't common, and it resonated deeply with those who heard the story. As dawn broke over the town, the events of the previous night began to ripple outward. News outlets picked up the story, broadcasting it across local channels. Social media lit up with posts praising the two men. Hashtags like "Not Real Heroes" and "Standing Up for Others" trended online, drawing comments from people all over the country. Some shared their own stories of being helped by strangers, while others expressed gratitude for reminders that good people still existed in the world. Reporters soon descended on the town, eager to capture every detail of the incident. Camera crews set up outside the cafe where the young woman worked, hoping to catch a glimpse of her. Others staked out the park where the bikers had been hanging out, searching for anyone willing to talk. The two men became the center of attention, though neither seemed particularly comfortable with it. They gave brief interviews, always steering the focus away from themselves and toward the importance of helping others. Despite the chaos surrounding them, the young woman found herself reflecting on the night's events. She replayed everything, in her mind, the moment the biker grabbed her, the terror that gripped her heart, and then the sudden appearance of the two men who changed everything. It felt surreal, like something out of a movie, but this wasn't fiction. This was her life, and it had been forever altered by their actions. Inspired by their courage, she decided to take control of her own narrative. She knew she couldn't undo what had happened, but she could choose how to move forward. With newfound determination, she signed up for a self-defense class at a community center nearby. At first, she was hesitant, unsure if she could handle the physical demands. But the instructors were patient and encouraging, teaching her techniques to build both strength and confidence. Slowly but surely, she began to feel empowered. Her journey didn't stop there. As she grew stronger, she realized she wanted to help others facing similar situations. She started volunteering at the same community center, assisting with workshops aimed at teaching women how to stay safe. Her story became a powerful tool, reminding participants that survival wasn't just about physical skills, it was also about mindset. "I didn't think I'd ever feel safe again," she told one group during a session. "But now I know I can take care of myself. And that's because of the people who showed me it's possible to stand up no matter what." Meanwhile, the two men returned to their normal lives, trying to leave the spotlight behind. The taller man went back to filming his movie, slipping seamlessly into his role as an action star. Off-screen, however, he carried the memory of that night with him. It reminded him of why he loved acting, not for the fame, but for the chance to tell stories that mattered. The second man continued traveling, attending events and meeting fans. He remained humble, often deflecting praise with a quiet smile and a simple, "I'm just glad I could help." Though they parted ways after the incident, the bond they formed in that alley stayed with them. Neither man had expected to become part of such a dramatic event, but both recognized the impact it had made. They had shown the world that heroism isn't reserved for superheroes or celebrities. It belongs to anyone willing to step up when it counts. Back in the town, life slowly returned to normal. The cafe reopened its doors. The park filled with families once again, and the streets grew quiet under the evening sky. But the memory of that night lingered, etched into the hearts of those who had witnessed it. For the young woman, it was a reminder of her resilience. For the community, it was proof that kindness and courage still existed. And for the two men, it was a testament to the power of doing the right thing, even when no one is watching. Months later, the town held a small ceremony to honor the heroes, The mayor presented them with awards thanking them for their bravery. Both men accepted graciously, using the opportunity to encourage others to look out for one another. "We're all capable of making a difference," the taller man said during his speech. "It doesn't take much, just a little courage and a lot of heart." As the crowd applauded, the young woman stood in the front row, smiling through tears. She had come full circle, transforming from a victim into someone who inspired others. And though the scars of that night would always remain, they no longer defined her. Instead, they served as a reminder of the strength she had found within herself, and the two strangers who had helped her find it. The ceremony held in the town square was a modest affair, but it carried a weight that no grand event could match. The mayor stood at the podium, his voice filled with emotion as he spoke about the night that had changed everything. "We often hear about heroes in movies or books," he said, pausing to look out at the crowd. "But today we honor two real-life heroes who showed us what true bravery looks like." The taller man and the second man sat side by side on folding chairs near the front, looking slightly uncomfortable under the spotlight. They weren't used to being celebrated this way, and their expressions made it clear they would have preferred to stay out of the limelight. Still, they listened intently as the mayor recounted the events of that fateful evening, his words painting a vivid picture of courage and selflessness. When it came time for them to speak, the taller man stepped up first. He adjusted the microphone, nervously glancing at the audience before beginning. "I don't think of myself as a hero," he admitted, his deep voice carrying across the square. "I saw someone in trouble and I did what anyone should do. I helped." His words were simple, but they resonated deeply with those listening. People nodded in agreement, some wiping away tears as they thought about how rare such acts of kindness had become. The second man followed, his tone softer but equally sincere. "What happened that night wasn't just about us," he said, gesturing toward the young woman seated nearby. "It's about all of us. We're stronger when we stand together, and we can make our communities safer if we choose to look out for one another." His message struck a chord, especially among the younger members of the audience, many of whom vowed silently to follow his example. After the speeches, the young woman approached the stage. She held a small bouquet of flowers in her hands, her fingers trembling slightly as she walked. When she reached the two men, she handed them the flowers and hugged each one tightly. "Thank you doesn't feel like enough," she said, her voice breaking. "But please know you saved more than just me. You gave me my life back." The moment was powerful, and it brought the entire crowd to its feet. Applause erupted, echoing through the square as people cheered not only for the two men, but also for the spirit of unity and compassion they represented. It was a reminder that even in a world often divided by differences, there were still moments when humanity shone brightest. In the weeks that followed, the ripple effects of that night continued to spread. The young woman threw herself into her volunteer work, spending hours teaching self-defense classes and sharing her story with anyone who would listen. Her transformation was remarkable. She went from being someone defined by fear to becoming a beacon of hope for others. Many participants in her workshops told her how much her courage inspired them, and she realized she wasn't just helping herself heal, she was helping others find strength too. Meanwhile, the two men returned to their respective lives, though their actions lingered in the minds of everyone they met. The taller man resumed filming his movie, but he noticed something different. On set, crew members and fellow actors treated him with newfound respect, not because of his fame, but because of the person he was off-screen. Strangers approached him during breaks, thanking him for setting an example of what it meant to be a good human being. The second man, ever the quiet observer, found himself reflecting on the experience whenever he traveled. He began incorporating stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things into his public appearances, encouraging fans to embrace kindness and empathy. His message resonated deeply, particularly with younger audiences who looked up to him not just as an actor but as a role model. Back in the town, the community rallied around the idea of looking out for one another. Neighbors started organizing neighborhood watch programs, ensuring that streets stayed safe and welcoming. Local businesses donated resources to expand the self-defense workshops, making them accessible to even more people. Even kids got involved, creating posters and flyers promoting safety tips and reminding everyone to stick together. One day, months after the incident, the young woman received a letter in the mail. It was from a girl who had attended one of her workshops. In the letter, the girl described how she had once felt powerless, afraid to walk home alone or stand up for herself. But after hearing the young woman's story and learning practical skills in the class, she felt braver than ever before. "You showed me that I'm not alone," the girl wrote. "And now I know I can protect myself." Reading those words brought tears to her eyes, not tears of sadness, but of pride. She realized that her journey hadn't just been about personal healing. It had been about creating a chain reaction of empowerment. By sharing her experience, she had inspired others to take control of their own lives, just as the two men had inspired her. As time passed, the memory of that night remained alive in different ways. For the young woman, it was a turning point, a moment when fear gave way to courage. For the two men, it was a reminder of why they valued humility and integrity above all else. And for the town, it became a symbol of unity, proof that even in the face of danger, people could come together to create something beautiful. Years later, when the story was retold, in classrooms, at family dinners, or during quiet conversations between friends, it never lost its power. It served as a testament to the fact that heroes aren't born, they're made in moments of choice. Whether it's stepping in to help a stranger, standing up against injustice, or simply lending a hand to someone in need, every act of kindness has the potential to change lives. And so the legacy of that night lived on, not just in the memories of those who witnessed it, but in the countless lives touched by the ripple effect of courage and compassion. It was a story of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, proving that true heroism isn't about fame or recognition. It's about the quiet, unshakable belief that we're all capable of making the world a little brighter, one brave decision at a time. The story of that night didn't fade with time. It grew stronger, embedding itself into the fabric of the community. People talked about it for years, not just as a tale of bravery, but as a lesson in humanity. It became one of those stories. Parents told their children when they needed to explain why kindness mattered, or how standing up for others could make all the difference. The young woman often found herself at the center of these conversations, not because she sought attention, but because her journey had become a beacon of hope. One evening, while volunteering at the community center, she met an older man who introduced himself as a retired teacher. He had heard her speak during one of the workshops and wanted to share his thoughts. "You remind me of someone I used to know," he said, his eyes twinkling with warmth. "She was a fighter too, always helping others even when she didn't have much herself." The young woman smiled, touched by the comparison. As they sat together, the man shared his own experiences, how he had once been bullied as a child and how a stranger's simple act of kindness had changed his life forever. Listening to him, she realized something important. Courage wasn't always loud or dramatic. Sometimes it was quiet and subtle, like offering a kind word or lending a hand when no one else would. That realization stayed with her long after the man left, shaping the way she approached her work. She began focusing not just on teaching physical skills, but also on fostering empathy and resilience in her students. Every class became a chance to plant seeds of strength and compassion, knowing they might grow into something extraordinary someday. Meanwhile, the two men from that fateful night continued to inspire others, though neither sought recognition for it. The taller man returned to his busy schedule, juggling film shoots and promotional tours. But whenever reporters asked about his latest projects, he always steered the conversation toward the importance of using fame responsibly. "Being in the spotlight gives you a platform," he explained during one interview. "And if I can use mine to encourage people to do good, then that's what I'll do." His words struck a chord, especially among younger fans who idolized him. Social media lit up with posts from teenagers and adults alike, sharing how his message had motivated them to volunteer, stand up against bullying, or simply be kinder in their everyday lives. One fan even started a campaign called "Be the Hero," encouraging people to perform random acts of kindness and post about them online. Within weeks, the hashtag went viral, spreading positivity across platforms and reminding everyone that heroism came in many forms. The second man, known for his introspective nature, took a different approach. He began visiting schools and youth centers, speaking directly to kids and teens about the power of choice. "Every day you face decisions," he told a group of high school students during one visit. "Some are small, like holding the door open for someone. Others are bigger, like stepping in when you see someone being treated unfairly. Each decision shapes who you are and the kind of world we live in." His talks were heartfelt and relatable, leaving audiences inspired to think twice before turning away from someone in need. Back in the town, the ripple effects of their actions kept growing. Local businesses banded together to sponsor self-defense programs, ensuring they remained free for anyone interested. Parents enrolled their children in classes, hoping to equip them with tools to navigate a sometimes unpredictable world. Even the police department got involved, sending officers to teach safety workshops alongside volunteers. It was a collaborative effort, driven by a shared desire to create a safer, more supportive community. One particularly memorable event took place on the anniversary of the incident. The town organized a special gathering in the park, where everything had begun. Hundreds of people showed up carrying candles and signs with messages like, "Kindness saves lives," and "Together we stand stronger." The young woman spoke briefly, her voice steady as she thanked everyone for keeping the spirit of that night alive. "We've come so far," she said, looking out at the sea of faces. "But let's not stop here. Let's keep building a world where no one feels afraid to ask for help or to give it." Her words sparked something in the crowd. People hugged strangers, exchanged phone numbers, and promised to stay connected. A local artist painted a mural commemorating the night, depicting two shadowy figures standing protectively over a young woman. Beneath it, he wrote, "Courage is contagious." Over time, the mural became a landmark, drawing visitors from neighboring towns and serving as a reminder of what the community had achieved together. As the months turned into years, the impact of that single night reached places no one could have predicted. Teachers incorporated the story into lesson plans, using it to teach students about empathy and civic responsibility. Nonprofits cited it as an example of grassroots activism, showing how individual acts of courage could lead to widespread change. Even filmmakers expressed interest in adapting it into a documentary, though the young woman politely declined, wanting to preserve its authenticity. For her part, she continued to thrive. What had started as a way to heal from trauma blossomed into a lifelong mission to empower others. She traveled to nearby towns, giving talks and leading workshops. Her confidence grew with each step, and she discovered a talent for storytelling that captivated audiences. By sharing her experience openly, she broke down barriers and encouraged others to confront their fears head-on. Through it all, she never forgot the two men who had changed her life. Though they rarely crossed paths, anymore she sent them updates occasionally, a note here, a photo there, to let them know how much their actions had meant. Both men responded warmly, expressing pride in the person she had become. They may not have known it at the time, but their decision to intervene hadn't just saved her, it had ignited a movement. Even today, the story continues to inspire. Whether it's a teenager standing up to bullies, a neighbor checking in on an elderly resident, or a stranger picking up groceries for someone in need, the echoes of that night resonate deeply. It serves as proof that heroism isn't reserved for the pages of novels or the screens of cinemas. It lives in the hearts of ordinary people, willing to do extraordinary things. And so, the legacy of that moment endures, not as a distant memory, but as a living, breathing force driving communities forward. It reminds us that every act of courage, no matter how small, has the power to transform lives. Because in the end, it's not just about saving someone from danger, it's about creating a world where everyone feels safe enough to shine. Years passed, but the story of that night refused to fade into obscurity. Instead, it grew richer with time, becoming a cornerstone of the town's identity. People often spoke about how one act of bravery had sparked a chain reaction of goodness, turning fear into hope and despair into action. The young woman, once defined by her vulnerability, now stood as a symbol of resilience. Her transformation was nothing short of remarkable, and she carried her newfound strength not just for herself, but for everyone around her. One day, while teaching a self-defense workshop at the community center, she noticed a familiar face in the crowd. It was an older woman who had been a regular attendee since the classes began. She always sat quietly in the back, listening intently but rarely participating. This time, however, she raised her hand during the Q&A session. "I've been meaning to ask you something," the woman said, her voice trembling slightly. "Do you ever feel scared anymore? Like, what if it happens again?" The question caught the young woman off guard, not because it was unexpected, she'd heard variations of it many times before, but because it came from someone she hadn't expected to open up. For months, this woman had blended into the background, observing without engaging. But now she was revealing a piece of herself, exposing a fear that mirrored the one the young woman had once felt so deeply. "I do get scared sometimes," she admitted honestly, looking directly at the older woman. "But here's the thing. Fear isn't the enemy. It's how we respond to it that matters. I used to let my fear control me, but now I use it to remind myself why I need to stay strong." Her words hung in the air, and for a moment, the room was silent. Then slowly the older woman nodded, tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you," she whispered. "I needed to hear that." That exchange stayed with the young woman long after the class ended. It reminded her that courage wasn't a destination. It was a journey. Even after years of growth and progress, there were still moments when doubt crept in or old fears resurfaced. But each time she chose to confront them head-on, knowing she wasn't alone. The support system she had built, the students, volunteers, teachers, and neighbors, was always there to lift her up. Meanwhile, the two men who had intervened that night continued to inspire others in their own ways. The taller man, now a household name thanks to his successful films, remained grounded despite his fame. He often visited schools and youth programs, speaking candidly about the importance of standing up for what's right. His talks weren't scripted or polished. They were raw and heartfelt, drawing from his personal experiences. Kids loved him not just because he was famous, but because he treated them like equals, listening to their stories and encouraging them to believe in themselves. One particularly memorable visit took place at a middle school where bullying had become a serious issue. The principal invited him to speak, hoping his presence might help bridge the divide between students. As he stood on stage, addressing a packed auditorium, he shared a story from his childhood. "When I was your age, I got picked on a lot," he confessed, his voice steady. "It made me feel small and powerless. But then I realized something. Even if I couldn't change how others treated me, I could decide how I responded. And that changed everything." His words struck a chord with the students. Afterward, several approached him, sharing their own struggles and asking for advice. One boy, visibly nervous, handed him a crumpled note that read, "I want to be brave like you." The man smiled, crouching down to meet the boy at eye level. "You already are," he replied. "Bravery isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right, even when you're scared." The second man, known for his introspective nature, took a quieter approach to making an impact. He began writing articles and essays about the power of ordinary people to create extraordinary change. His pieces were thoughtful and reflective, often exploring themes of empathy, kindness, and the ripple effects of small actions. Readers connected deeply with his words, finding comfort and inspiration in his perspective. One article, titled "The Ripple Effect of Courage," went viral, sparking conversations across social media and prompting countless individuals to share their own stories of stepping up in difficult situations. Back in the town, the spirit of unity continued to flourish. People looked out for one another, forming bonds that transcended age, background, and circumstance. Neighbors organized potluck dinners and block parties, bringing everyone together under the guise of celebration but really fostering a sense of belonging. Local businesses collaborated to fund projects aimed at improving safety and accessibility, ensuring that no one felt left behind. Even the park where the bikers had once loitered underwent a transformation, with new benches, lights, and walking paths installed to make it more welcoming. One summer evening, the town hosted its annual fair, a beloved tradition that drew visitors from miles away. Stalls lined the streets offering handmade crafts, delicious food, and games for children. Music filled the air, laughter echoed through the crowd, and the atmosphere buzzed with joy. Amidst the festivities, a special booth stood out, decorated with colorful banners and photos. It showcased the story of that fateful night and the positive changes it had inspired. Volunteers handed out flyers promoting self-defense workshops, neighborhood watch programs, and other initiatives, born from the community's collective effort. As the sun set and fireworks lit up the sky, the young woman found herself standing near the booth, watching families enjoy the evening. A little girl tugged at her mother's hand, pointing excitedly at one of the banners. "Mommy, look, those people are heroes," she exclaimed. Her mother smiled, nodding in agreement. "Yes, sweetheart," she said softly. "And you can be a hero too, just like them." Hearing those words brought tears to the young woman's eyes. She realized that the legacy of that night wasn't confined to the past. It lived on in the present and future, carried forward by every person who chose to embody its message. Whether it was a child learning about kindness, a teenager standing up against injustice, or an adult lending a helping hand, the spirit of courage thrived wherever it was nurtured. Even today, the story continues to evolve. New chapters unfold as people share their experiences, inspired by the original tale. Some recount moments when they stepped in to help a stranger. Others talk about overcoming personal challenges. Each story adds depth to the narrative, proving that heroism is universal and timeless. For the young woman, the journey has been both humbling and empowering. She knows she'll never forget the terror of that night, or the gratitude she feels toward the two men who saved her. But more importantly, she understands that her role isn't just to remember, it's to pass the torch. By teaching, sharing, and living with purpose, she ensures that the light of courage keeps shining, illuminating paths for others to follow. And so, the story lives on, not as a relic of the past, but as a living testament to the power of humanity. It reminds us that even in our darkest moments there is always hope, that even when we feel powerless we have the ability to rise, and that even when we stand alone, we are part of something greater, a community bound together by courage, compassion, and the unshakable belief that we can make a difference. The years rolled on, and the story of that night became more than just a memory. It evolved into a movement. It wasn't about fame or recognition anymore. It was about creating a culture of kindness, courage, and community. The young woman, who had once been a victim, now stood at the forefront of this transformation. Her journey intertwined with the lives of countless others who had been inspired by her resilience. One chilly autumn morning, she received an email from a man she didn't know. His subject line read, "You changed my life." Curious, she opened it and began reading. The man explained that he had stumbled upon one of her talks online during a particularly dark time in his life. He had lost his job, felt disconnected from his family, and was struggling to find purpose. But hearing her story gave him hope. "I realized I wasn't alone," he wrote. "And I decided to start small, helping neighbors, volunteering at shelters, anything to make someone else's day better. Slowly, my life turned around. Thank you for showing me that even little actions matter." Her heart swelled as she read his words. This was what she had hoped for, to inspire people to take action no matter how insignificant it might seem. She responded warmly, thanking him for sharing his experience and encouraging him to keep going. Their brief exchange reminded her of something important. Change doesn't happen overnight, but every step forward counts. Meanwhile, the two men who had intervened that fateful night continued to leave their mark on the world, though they remained humble about their roles. The taller man, now a global icon thanks to his blockbuster films, used his platform wisely. During interviews, he often steered conversations toward meaningful topics like mental health, equality, and the importance of standing up for others. Fans noticed this shift and admired him not just as an actor, but as a thoughtful human being. On one occasion, he visited a youth detention center hoping to connect with teenagers who felt trapped by their circumstances. As he spoke to them, he shared stories of his own struggles, times when he doubted himself, made mistakes, and worried he wouldn't amount to much. "None of us are perfect," he told them, "but we all have the power to choose how we move forward. You don't have to let your past define you. Every day is a chance to rewrite your story." His message resonated deeply with the teens. Afterward, several approached him asking questions and opening up about their fears and dreams. One boy handed him a drawing he'd made, a simple sketch of a hand reaching out to another. "This is what you did for us today," he said quietly. "Thank you." The man smiled, touched by the gesture, and promised to stay in touch. The second man, ever introspective, took a different approach to spreading positivity. He began mentoring young filmmakers, guiding them as they worked on projects centered around real-life heroes and unsung champions of their communities. Together, they created short documentaries highlighting stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things, teachers working tirelessly for their students, nurses going above and beyond for patients, volunteers rebuilding neighborhoods after disasters. These films were shown at festivals and online, inspiring viewers to look closer at the world around them and recognize the quiet acts of heroism happening every day. Back in the town where it all began, the spirit of unity grew stronger with each passing year. People embraced the idea that everyone had a role to play in making their community safer and kinder. Local schools introduced programs focused on empathy and conflict resolution, teaching children early on the value of standing up for one another. Parents organized weekend cleanup drives, turning neglected areas into vibrant spaces where families could gather. Even the police department adopted a more community-centered approach, hosting regular meet and greets to build trust and encourage open dialogue. One spring afternoon, the town held its first-ever Day of Courage event. Streets were closed off, and booths were set up showcasing various initiatives born from the original story. There were demonstrations on self-defense, workshops on mental health awareness, and storytelling sessions featuring residents sharing moments when they chose to act bravely. At the center of it all stood a large mural painted by local artists, a vivid depiction of two shadowy figures protecting a young woman, surrounded by symbols of unity and strength. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light over the festivities, the young woman addressed the crowd. Her voice rang clear and strong as she thanked everyone for keeping the spirit of that night alive. "We've come so far," she said, her eyes scanning the sea of faces. "But our work isn't done. Let's continue to lift each other up, to be the light in someone else's darkness, because when we stand together, there's nothing we can't overcome." Her words ignited a wave of applause, followed by spontaneous hugs and promises to keep pushing forward. A group of teenagers performed a dance routine dedicated to courage, while musicians played songs about resilience and hope. It was a celebration not just of what had been achieved, but of the potential still waiting to unfold. Even today, the legacy of that night continues to ripple outward. Teachers incorporate the story into lesson plans, nonprofits cite it as an example of grassroots activism, and strangers share their own acts of bravery online using hashtags inspired by the movement. Each retelling adds new layers, proving that heroism isn't limited to grand gestures. It thrives in the everyday choices we make to care for one another. For the young woman, the journey has been transformative. What started as a way to heal from trauma blossomed into a lifelong mission to empower others. She travels to nearby towns, giving talks and leading workshops, always emphasizing that courage isn't about being fearless. It's about choosing to act despite fear. And through it all, she carries the gratitude of knowing she's part of something bigger than herself. The two men occasionally cross paths with her, sending updates on their respective journeys. Though they rarely speak publicly about that night, their actions continue to reflect its lessons. They remind everyone that heroism isn't reserved for the pages of novels or the screens of cinemas. It lives in the hearts of ordinary people willing to do extraordinary things. In the end, the story serves as a powerful reminder that every act of kindness, no matter how small, has the potential to change lives. It challenges us to ask ourselves, what will we do when faced with a moment of choice? Will we turn away, or will we step up? Because in those moments we discover not only who we are, but who we can become. And that, perhaps, is the greatest gift of all.